and welcome. I'm Aman Soni, and today I'll be discussing with you a very important topic from 11th class NCERT. The topic is actually economic reforms, and in economic reforms, as we know, there are three different components. The three different components in economic reforms are liberalization, privatization, and globalization. And today we are discussing a small component of all these economic reforms. We are discussing liberalization. So what is exactly liberalization? So before telling you about what is exactly liberalization, I need to tell you the background. Point is, starting from 1948 till 1990, that is, there is how many? 50 to 42 years. This 42 years, India was actually shaped by industrial policies. Industrial Policy Resolution 48, Industrial Policy Resolution 56, and there were other various industrial regulations also. But point is, all these rules and regulations, they were brought for the benefit of Indian economy. They were brought for the growth of Indian economy. But these industrial policy resolutions, these policies, these rules, instead of helping India to grow, they actually they compress the throat of Indian economy. They pressurize the throat of Indian economy. Indian economy could not grow because of that. So hence, when India was facing BOP crisis and India had to take a loan from IMF, and IMF's conditionalities, it says that if any country has to borrow from IMF, then that country needs to bring reforms like liberalization, privatization, globalization. So hence, before telling you about what liberalization is, what did we do, what type of reforms we got in liberalization, let me just little bit tell you about what happened before liberalization. All right. So it says that rules and laws which were aimed at regulating economic activities became major hindrances in growth and development. All right, as we discussed earlier, liberalization was introduced to put an end to these restrictions and open up various sectors of the economy. Though a few liberalization, this is important, that though a few liberalization efforts were done in 1980s also, and these liberalization efforts, they pertain to like export, import, fiscal policy, technology upgradation, foreign investment, but the big reforms, they came in 1991 only. So let us see what happened. So some important areas where liberalization took place, they were the industrial sector, the financial sector, tax reforms, foreign exchange markets, and trade and investment. All right, and we'll discuss all of them one by one. So first is deregulation of industrial sector. Look, in industries, there were like four type of regulations were there in Indian industry. First type of regulation was license, quota, permit, Raj. License, quota, permit, Raj. So if any company, if any entrepreneur had to start a business, stop a business, increase the production, change the area, he had to take a license from the government. So point is, and this license was given easily in backward areas. This license was given with great difficulty in those areas which had agglomeration effect, which already had industries. As such, the intention of this license, quota, permit, Raj was nice. But point is, big industries, because of their financial advantage, they were able to bribe the government officials and were able to get a license, and new entrepreneurs, they were not able to get a license. So license, quota, permit, Raj was one regulation which was like hurting entrepreneurship. Second thing is, private sector was not allowed in certain sector, in certain private industries were not allowed in certain sectors. If you remember, we classified the industries into A, B and C categories. All right. So in certain categories, private industries were not allowed. They were restricted only and only to government enterprises. Third thing is, a lot many goods could be produced by small scale industries also. Government wanted to encourage small scale industries. Government wanted to increase employment in these labor intensive industries, and hence it wanted to protect these small scale industries. It wanted that, it knew that these small scale industries, they were not in position to compete with the corporates. Hence, It said that certain sectors would be reserved only for small scale industries, all right, and there were certain controls on price fixation and distribution of selected industrial products also. The government was indulging in regulation of prices. Government wanted that that consumers get goods at a reasonable prices, hence there were regulation on prices also. So these were the regulations in industrial sector, but then we did the deregulation of industrial sector. So what did we do? First, industrial licensing was abolished, except for few goods. Which goods were there for which industrial licensing was not abolished? Those goods were alcohol, cigarettes, hazardous chemicals, industrial explosive, electronics, aerospace, drugs and pharmaceuticals. Only for these goods a license was required. For manufacture of any other good, the license was not required. Second, and then I told you that certain sectors were reserved only for public sector, but that number of sectors which were having monopoly of the public sector, in which private sectors were not allowed, those number of sectors were reduced gradually. All right. Now, defense equipments, atomic energy generation and railway transport, and it is given in NCERT that only these sectors are reserved for public sector, but now only atomic energy generation is reserved for the government. Defense equipment, private companies are setting up, and government has decided that there would be privatization of Indian railways also. We would also have private trains as we have private buses. So only atomic energy generation is reserved for the government entities now. Then many goods produced by small scale industries have now been de-reserved. That is, even big companies, corporates can also produce those goods which were earlier limited to small scale industries. Example, making pickle, making honey. All right. Then what were the reforms in financial sector? So what is included in financial sector? When I say financial sector, it includes banks, stock exchanges, foreign exchange market. It also includes insurance. So all these sectors, they come under financial sector. And what are the reforms under financial sector? Let's discuss them. Earlier what was happening is all the financial institutions, they were strictly controlled by RBI, strictly regulated by RBI, but those regulations were brought down such that the role of RBI from a regulator, it was made of a facilitator. It shouldn't control the things, it should facilitate and should allow the private sector to flourish. This means that financial sector may be allowed to take decisions on many matters without consulting the RBI. For example, opening up a new branch, no permission of RBI is required. The reform policies led to the establishment of private sector banks, foreign banks also. Foreign investment in bank was raised to around 50%. Now that foreign investment in private bank is 74%. All right. They were allowed to set up new branches without the approval of RBI. Then FIIs, they were also allowed to invest in Indian financial markets. All right. Then what type of tax reforms were there? Look, when we do tax reforms, that means we are bringing some change in fiscal policy. And what type of changes were brought in fiscal policy? Let's discuss them. It says that there are two types of taxes. Yes, we know there are two types of taxes, direct taxes and indirect taxes. In case of direct taxes, tax impact and tax incidence are on same person, while in case of indirect taxes, tax impact and tax incidence are on different persons. If I talk about direct taxes, example of direct tax is corporate tax. Government reduced the corporate tax so that overall the corporates have more money to reinvest. All right. At the same time, indirect taxes such as excise duty and all, they were also reduced. All right. VAT was brought. Then in case of direct taxes, we also have income tax, where we led to simplification of tax process. earlier people were not filing taxes because it's not that they wanted to evade tax, but point is tax filing was so difficult that they could not pay tax. Hence, government brought a reform where it simplified the process of filing tax returns. So, what were foreign exchange reserves? The foreign exchange reforms was rupee was devalued, and because of devaluation of rupee, our exports increased. And this was first thing, devaluation, and later from fixed exchange rate regime, we went to manage floating exchange rate regime. All right. Okay. Then what were trade and investment policy reforms? When I say trade and investment policy reforms, it means we are making it easier for Indian exports to export and Indian importers to import. That is what is talking about trade and investment policy reforms. All right. What was the aim of this? The aim was to promote the efficiency of local industries and the adoption of modern technologies. All right. That was the aim. So what did we do over here in trade and investment policy reforms? It says that when we wanted to protect our domestic industries, why were there trade controls? Because we wanted to protect our domestic industries, and how we were protecting our domestic industries by quantitative restriction, which is also called quota. So under quota, there was a limit on how many goods we could import in 1 year, and other way was imposing high import duties. So these two trade restrictions were there. One was quota and other was high import duties. All right. So the trade policy reforms aimed at dismantling of quantitative restrictions on imports and exports, reduction of tariff rates, removal of licensing procedures for imports. So now import licensing was abolished except in case of hazardous and environmentally sensitive industries. Quantitative restrictions on imports of manufactured consumer goods and agricultural commodities was fully removed, and export duties have been removed to increase competitiveness of Indian goods. So these were the all steps which we had taken during liberalization. If we put up a rewind of this, we did all type of liberalization reforms in terms of industrial sector, in terms of financial sector, in terms of taxes, in terms of foreign exchange, and in terms of trade and investment. I hope you liked the session. I hope you understood what we discussed. Thank you.